Good afternoon. Welcome you all to today's workshop on good clinical practice. At the onset, I want to thank Association of Physicians of India West Bengal branch to provide us this opportunity to present this very important workshop under the banner of PRF West Bengal branch. And we are really thankful to Professor Jyotirmoy Pal, our President, Association of Physicians of India, for being always with us, guiding us. And I think this good clinical practice guideline is very crucial for all of us, especially when we talk about clinical research. There is no alternative to good clinical practice. So today we will discuss about this 4 agenda for next 30 minutes. We'll try to understand the definition of GCP, the history behind GCP, evolution, principles of GCP, and finally, we'll also discuss one case study. To define GCP, first of all, we need to remember it is good clinical research practice. The R is missing in GCP, but actually, this is the standard for different aspect of clinical trial. It could be designing, conducting, performing, monitoring, auditing, recording, analyzing, and reporting. And this provides assurance, 2 assurances. One, the data and reported results are credible and accurate. 2, the rights, integrity, and confidentiality of the trial subject should be protected. So with this standard, with this GCP, good clinical practice, which is a standard for different parts of clinical trials, giving us 2 assurance. One, the data and reported results are credible and accurate. And 2, the rights, integrity, and confidentiality of the trial subjects are protected. So this is according to ICH E6. We will try to understand what is ICH, what is E6 later. But WHO in 1995 also defined GCP, which is not that popular like what just now we had discussed about GCP definition. So according to WHO, this is a standard for clinical studies. So I say GCP is telling about clinical trial standard, but actually WHO GCP was a little bit broadened. All clinical studies, be it clinical trials or even it other observational studies, basic issue is same. This standard should encompasses the design, conduct, monitoring, termination, audit, analysis, reporting, and documentation of the studies, and which ensures that the study should be scientifically sound and ethically sound. So sometimes it is very important because when we talk about scientifically sound, automatically it should be ethically sound. Bad science is equal to bad ethics. We need to remember. So it is about clinical properties of the pharmaceutical product. It could be diagnostic, therapeutic, or prophylactic under investigation. Again, they should be properly documented. So documentation is again an important part of GCP. We need to remember. So why GCP is important? So when we talk about good clinical practice, there is 2 parts if we think: quality data, data quality, and ethics. And here, when we talk about ethics, it is about the rights, integrity, and confidentiality of trial subjects that should be protected. According to uh, the quality data, what we understand, this is about the data and reported results. They should be credible and accurate. So now if we want to summarize the purpose of GCP, why GCP is important, we have two aims. Number one, the data and reported results should be credible and accurate. Number two, rights, integrity, and confidentiality of trial subjects should be protected. Now, the little bit about history. Why history is important? Because we know with each stroke of hammer in the patellar tendon, we'll have the knee-jerk response. And with these all atrocities, we got certain ethical principles, be it Nazi war crimes, be it Tuskegee syphilis trial, be it thalidomide disaster, Jewish chronic disease trial, the Willowbrook study, the Milgram study. End result, yes, those are very, we do not want this type of events to be repeated, but with these events, we got something which is good for mankind and for the history of clinical research. The thing is that everything looks good, it's not actually good. What is happening behind the wall is that is very important. So here at the Willowbrook School, we can see here, just hold on, I hope my arrows are visible. So this is the Willowbrook School, which is generally they are having the mentally disabled students. What they do, they had allowed the hepatitis A to be sprayed amongst the students, and without offering any treatment, they just see the natural history of hepatitis A, which is totally, there is no word to say. So the concept of vulnerability first arises here. And now if we can go through this picture where some black prisoners, they had been injected here. Actually, they were suffering from syphilis, but they do not get penicillin because the experimenter, the researcher want to see the natural history of syphilis. Again, the vulnerable population, and they being exposed with some disease, and they had been utilized to see the natural course of the disease progression. And here we can see the Nazi war prisoners, they had been exposed to the extreme of temperatures, be it cold or be it hot, just to check their physiological changes. Now we can see this beautiful girl, Focomelia patient. And here we can see the William McBride, the Austrian physician. He had first time noticed these cases of thalidomide disaster and reported and saved mankind from further disasters. And here the lady, Frances Kelsey from US, awarded for the highest civilian award. She was taking the highest civilian award from then President Kennedy. Why? Because she had stopped the entry of thalidomide in US market. She had noticed something from the animal studies of thalidomide, and which had raised some questions, and she had stopped the entry of thalidomide in US and saved a lot of American mothers from this disaster. So that's why she had been awarded. But what happened then? More stringent regulations that had been adopted by FDA, the US government, and there was a landmark amendment, Kefauver-Harris Amendment, which had been done, and they had make a mandatory scrutiny for all the new drugs. Here we can see the Milgram study, which actually faked the test subject. So the transparency was not there with the subject. The information was not appropriately spread to the subject. This is again continuation with the Tuskegee syphilis trial, the Guatemala syphilis experiments from 1946 to 1948, almost 1,500 participants, not published. The grant funded by US NIH, just imagine. Researchers paid prostitutes infected with syphilis to have sex with prisoners, the female sex workers, prisoners, some soldiers, and mental hospital patients. They were the subjects. So 1948, the experiment had been finished, and US issued apology in 2010. Similarly, if we go back to the Tuskegee syphilis trial, so almost 20, 30 years after, Bill Clinton mentioned this from the White House. Ultimately, they say sorry. So with all this heat, with all these atrocities, the knee-jerk reactions happened. We got different ethical principles, be it Nuremberg Code in 1949, after that Nazi war crimes, then Declaration of Helsinki in 1964, the Belmont Report in 1979, Council for International Organizations of Medical Sciences, 1993. This Belmont Report is very important, which had three pillars, important pillars. Number one, respect for person, the autonomy, and especially special protection to the vulnerable population, those with diminished autonomy. Then beneficiaries, means maximizing the possible benefits and minimizing the possible harm. Non-maleficence, no harm. And then justice, equitable distribution of getting selected for the sharing of benefit and burden of medical research, evenly distribution of that. So subjects selected should be selected fairly to ensure that the benefits and burdens of medical research are evenly distributed. Now we'll discuss about 13 principles. Before that, we need to remember these three cardinal principles again and again, because they are the heart of good clinical practice guideline. Even today's medical practice, these three cardinal principles we need to follow as a practitioner: autonomy, beneficence, and justice. Our aim should be maximizing the possible benefits and minimizing the possible harms. So what is autonomy? Each person should be given the respect, time, and opportunity necessary to make his or her own decisions. So we'll learn about informed consent in details from Dr. Pradeep Narayan. So sir will tell about details about the ICD, the informed consent process. So autonomy is very important, cardinal principles. Next, beneficence. It obligates the researcher to secure the well-being of all study participants. And then justice. Yes, it is a difficult and complex ethical issue, but our attempt should be made to distribute the risk and benefits fairly and without bias. Again and again, equitable distribution. Who should bear the risk of a study and who should receive its benefits? Participants should not be selected due to class, socioeconomic status, or race, unless justified by study objectives. Few years back, I had seen one pharmacogenomic study which had been done for sulfonylureas, and they had selected Bengali Brahmin population. So they had justified why they select the Bengali Brahmin population as a study subjects. So that is important. Otherwise, if there is no justification, we cannot select participants due to depending on the class, depending on the socioeconomic status, or any race. Now coming to 1990s, which is also known as the decade of harmonization. The first time this meeting happened in Brussels. What is ICH? The full form. I think this is a very important MCQ question again. What is ICH? International Conference on Harmonization. So, International Conference on Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Registration of Pharmaceuticals for Human Use. So, primary participants were US, European Union, Japan. There were regulatory and industry representatives. Canada, Australia, Nordic countries, they had played the role of observer. WHO acted as facilitator. What were the ICH topics? Q for quality, S for safety, E for efficacy, and M for multidisciplinary. And now, again, if we revisit the definition of GCP, there we had found ICH E6. So when we talk about GCP, it comes under the efficacy part, efficacy domain, and sixth, so E6. So this is why it was written as E6. So ICH GCP E6. These are the different parts of that GCP. ICH GCP starts with glossary, principles, the roles of ethical committee, how it should be formulated, role of investigators, sponsors, how protocol should be prepared, how investigators' brochure should be prepared, what are the different essential documents. I request all of you who are interested, please go through the ICH GCP E6 document. This is easily downloadable, so you will get an idea. Now coming to the 13 core principles of GCP. We need to remember it as clinical researcher. We need to remember it as ethics committee member. Each research proposal should be scrutinized with these 13 magnifying glasses. After that, we can pass the proposal. Number 1, ethical conduct. Number 2, risk-benefit assessment. Number 3, subjects over science and society. Number 4, adequacy of the pre-existing information. Number 5, scientific validity. Number 6, independent review. Number 7, medically qualified care. Number 8, trained and experienced personnel. Number 9, informed consent. Number 10, efficiency of information handling. Number 11, confidentiality. Number 12, drug accountability. And finally, number 13, quality through systems and procedures. Now, one by one. So when you talk about GCP principle 1, it is about the ethical conduct. So according to the Declaration of Helsinki, according to the ethical principles, as we had mentioned, autonomy, beneficence, and justice, all the clinical trials should be conducted. When we talk about risk-benefit assessment, the second principle, before initiating a trial, we need to weigh the foreseeable risk and inconveniences against the anticipated benefit for the individual trial and subject and society. Then we need to initiate and continue only if the anticipated benefit justify the risk. So that is very important. So that is why a risk-benefit assessment need to be done, and that also depends on the timing, at what time we are doing clinical trial. Now, the third principle, subject over science and society. It is not like that I need to bring a fantastic COVID vaccine to save the humanity, and that is why I am going to do anything with the participant. No, not at all, because the subject right is over the science and society. Each subject, each patient, each participant, they are important. The rights, safety, and well-being of the trial subjects are the most important considerations and should prevail over the interest of science and society. Coming to the principle 4, the adequacy of the pre-existing information. So if I am scrutinizing a phase 3 clinical trial, it is our duty to go through the data of phase 2 or phase 1 clinical trial or non-clinical trials. So the available non-clinical and clinical information on an investigational product should be adequate to support the proposed clinical trial. The fifth principle, the scientific validity. As we had mentioned, bad science is equal to bad ethics. The ethics is zero with bad science. So clinical trials should be scientifically sound and described in a clear, detailed protocol. When we talk about principle 6, the independent review, a trial should be conducted in compliance with the protocol that has received prior institutional review board or independent ethics committee approval or favorable opinion. So that is why we are submitting our protocol to independent ethics committee or institutional review board, and their members are trying to scrutinize our proposal. The seventh principle, the medical care given to and medical decisions made on behalf of subjects should always be responsibility of a qualified physician, or when it is a dental trial, and that's time the qualified dentist. So the qualification of the physician is also important. It is not like that I am participating in a clinical trial, so I do not have any right to get the treatment. So the medically qualified care with an appropriate physician need to be continued. The training, the principle number 8, trained and experienced personnel. Each individual involved in conducting a trial should be qualified by education, training, and experience to perform his or her respective task. And that is why the documentation also important. And most of us today, we are participating in this workshop. One of our aim is to get the certificate. Of course, we all get the certificate, but my request is please be careful while filling the Google form, especially for the pre and post test questions. So to satisfy this principle number 8, one of the recommendation is we should have the GCP certification to become a principal investigator or being a part of an investigation team or even part of ethics committee. Informed consent is the principle number 9. So freely given informed consent should be obtained from every subject prior to clinical trial participation. Efficiency of information handling. So here we need to give emphasis on the data credibility part, and all clinical trial information should be recorded, handled, and stored in a way that allows its accurate reporting, interpretation, and verification. The 11th principle is confidentiality. The confidentiality of records that could identify subjects should be protected, respecting the privacy and confidentiality rules in accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements. So the confidentiality is again an important part of GCP. So when we talk about drug accountability, there is another guideline which is important while conducting clinical trial, that is GMP, good manufacturing practice. So in this principle of GCP, the 12th principle of GCP, both GCP and GMP submerges. So investigational products should be manufactured, handled, and stored in accordance with applicable good manufacturing practice, and they should be used in accordance with the approved protocol. So again, this is an important part. And principle number 13, the final principle, which tells us about quality through systems and procedures. So quality assurance. So systems with procedures that assure the quality of every aspect of the trial that should be implemented, aspects of the trial that are essential to ensure human subject protection and reliability of the trial results should be the focus of this quality assessment or assurance system. Now we'll discuss one case study quickly. Let's start. You have noticed that in the rural part of your state, there seems to be an excessive amounts of Crohn's disease among Adivasi farm workers. You suspect that an exposure to the Mycobacterius aureus, which is found in the crops in your state, is responsible for this outbreak of Crohn's disease. You develop an antibiotic regimen that is highly effective for that Mycobacterius aureus, and now want to conduct a placebo controlled trial to treat this patient. So you develop an informed consent in local language that has been approved by IRB. You hire interpreter to help with the informed consent. Now enrollment started. You were amazed that everyone asked to enroll is agreeable. There is 100% enrollment. Now, an interim analysis done at 6 months, and that results are not what was expected. So you became very sad. And while walking through one of the farm worker housing units, what you had found, you noted a box with 100 vials of your carefully labeled study medication. And none of these seals have been broken on the vials. So you find that the study subjects all signed on to the study because they thought their job was in jeopardy if they did not participate. So the interpreter did not explain what the trial was about. And to your dismay, the subjects did not read the informed consent to literacy issues. So what was good in this case? Yes, obviously, there is something sound scientific reasoning for this trial. They took the IRB approval before initiation. The informed consent was translated into local language, and you had also hired the interpreter. But problem, why it went wrong? What are the important principles from where this case actually deviated from the GCP? Yes, the informed consent was not informed. And these are the vulnerable population. We need to be extra careful while taking the informed consent because they have a potential for coercion. And the translator not qualified to perform his or her task. So the 13th principle, overall quality assurance assessment, we need to be very cautious about that. So finally, to summarize, when you talk about ethics, good clinical practice, what we believe is a multiplied product of 2M. I'm not talking about money here. M means, 2M means, one is morality and another is materialism. And it's a multiplied product. Why multiplied? Because if for a particular research, the morality is 0, it could be a very high materialism. But ultimately, the end result, the ethics will be 0. Something multiplied by 0 is 0. Same thing. One research could be highly moral. You take all the care of your research participants. But the materialism, the science is 0. The protocol is nothing. The rationale for that particular research is not that appropriate. So that also makes the ethics equal to 0, because the morality multiplied by something called 0 is equal to 0. So ethics will be 0. Now question arises. Yes, we can assess the materialism. There are multiple tools we have, multiple way by which we can understand whether I am talking a good science or bad science. But how we can understand morality? Is there any simple rule? I think yes. The Vedvyas had written a beautiful sloka, Atmana Pratikulani Pareshuna Samachare. When Yudhishthir asked Vidura that how I can be a good king, so Vidur told to follow this principle, Atmana Pratikulani Pareshuna Samachare. That means do unto others what you would like others to do unto you. So being a researcher, just pick yourself and place yourself in the chair of the research participants and think what you are doing, whether it is actually right or wrong. You will get the answer. So thank you very much once again. So this was the first lecture. All the question answer will be discussed during the panel discussion. We have Professor Nandini Chatterjee, Madam, with us during the panel discussion. Madam will cover all the questions that had been asked, that will be asked by you. Please type your questions in the chat box. And now we'll move towards the next session. Once again, thank you all for your listening. And please fill the Google form, the pre-test and post-test, because that is very important for your certification. So thank you all.